and also considering longer retreats. I know a lot of Westerners don't do longer retreats. We usually practice in the evening, and is that something we should focus on more? Do we lose out on a lot of important practice because we choose to practice in our everyday lives instead?
I mean, the more and more we think about that aspect of practice, the way we live and so on, it feels more and more that the more we are out there or in this, out there in living very close by with modernity, the longer the retreat we need, you know. I mean, really, to somehow balance the thing out. It feels that way sometimes. But of course, it's just not realistic at all, of course. Because that will just simply mean going out of the system and become unknown. But pretty much that was the purpose of retreat, actually, I think, long ago. Because even back in those days, like for example over the Himalayas, of course, as I said, there was hardly any entertainment at all. I mean, if you had to think about any, if you had to think about any worldly entertainment beside the spirituality, yes, was there maybe pillage the next neighbor, you know, and that was the only worldly entertainment. You know. But besides that, there was nothing else. But still, even though there was such lack of worldly entertainment to get distracted into, still the mind was at some point started to become solid in a way, identifying oneself with just fixating on just one thing. And now from a Buddhist point of view, that is not so healthy, because then that could mean that then you are festering a sort of a seed. I mean, you are sort of cultivating a seed for fear, for all kinds of disturbances later on. Some could be on the spot, some afterwards, you know. So therefore, even back then, practice in a form of retreat was very much encouraged. Why? Because, I mean, that's just my thinking, is that when you enter into retreat, you become actually a nobody, actually. Yeah. You completely lose your identity. Not because the practice was so great and so mysterious and so like how they present in the movies and things like that. No, not in that sense at all. That there was suddenly a very sort of secret chanting, and suddenly there's a magical thing happening there. It was simply because if you went into a cave, or if you went into that remote place, you have no real interaction, like a society would have. Yes? A society, each set of society has their own generic as well as their unique way of communicating and identifying themselves. And when you go into a retreat, all of those disappears right there and then, even if you haven't began any practice at all. And if you have no interaction, why do you need to follow up certain formalities, certain standards of communication? All of those don't matter. Yes? And your thoughts, everyday thoughts, because normally when we get up, the moment we brush our teeth and begin to dress up and begin to prepare our breakfast, we are already, way before we actually interact with any individual, we are already preparing the interactions in our head already. I mean, like for example, when we had birds and pets like birds and cats and dogs, I mean, from their perspective, it must be very fascinating, yes, if they could read our thoughts. Because, of course, we are doing the same ritual every day, of course, which is very normal, of course. We need to have breakfast, we need to wash up, we need to do everything. But no matter what routine we are following, if they look inside our head, the things that are going inside that head, it's just fascinating. It's not in touch with anything that we do there. Yes? It's completely separate and way beyond. And whereas in the retreats, of course, when we initially enter in, we have that habit, of course. So we have that habit. So in the initial few months or the first few years, I think there is that sort of a transition. So within that, during the transition, then we feel a little bit. We still follow that same rhythm of. Talking to ourselves, thinking ahead of, okay, what's next, the next schedule, this, that. But after some time, we lose all that. Because there's no need for it at all. Yes. Of course, there is a daily routine, of course, within the retreat. But it's not so complicated. It's very simple. What you're supposed to do is exactly what you're supposed to think. That there is no difference. You are supposed to be very much going together with what you think. And if you need to play the drum, then you just play the drum, nothing else. You know? And so it was I mean, from my thinking is that it was a way to become nobody. Yes. And that helped a lot, I think. Because then it helped you to realize sort of who you are in a way originally, and who originally as well as where you are also very much, and that is nowhere, you know. That's the thing. That's a very simple way of talking about emptiness, actually. Yeah? Rather than using that word and then confusing ourselves, you know. Because when we are born, we come from actually out of nowhere, yes. Even after we have our body, we are able to barely walk. Still, we haven't any thoughts in ourselves, concept in ourselves. So much so that we don't know how we came into being. So of course, now when we're educated with our teachers about learning the alphabets and vocabularies, then we begin to have a sense of who we are. Or the moment when parents teach us and say that, no, don't do that. Oh, good boy, or you know, that they will praise you for doing something and they will criticize you for doing something, and that helps you to somehow have an identity. Yes. But until then, we are nowhere. So therefore, considering the way we lived so far now in this modern world, it looks like we need to enter into a long retreat in a way. But of course, that's just, as I said earlier, it's not realistic at all. But if you can have a routine, then it could help. Just like how we nourish ourselves with 3 meals a day. In the same way, if not 3 times a day, at least one time a day. And that could be also not that lengthy, yeah? Maybe half an hour. At most, if you can really afford, maybe 1 hour. But maybe half an hour is probably very healthy. I mean, I say sometimes at the extreme, at the last resort, maybe 5 minutes. You know, but of course that's very short. But at least it's something. Something's better than nothing. And so if you have that kind of routine on a daily basis, what will help is that then we will, what it will do is that at least there will be a sort of a lingering thought at the back of our mind. about maybe I'm a nobody, you know, just maybe. And even if we're not very confident about it, at least we have a doubt, you know. Yeah. But in a very healthy way, of course. That's very important. Otherwise, of course, when we are unhappy, when we are very much burdened by sadness, of course, we go into an extreme mode of thinking that we are nobody. That's very unhealthy, of course, because that can drive us then insane, of course, and lose, and then interact with the reality or the nature in a very unhealthy way. So, what the practice is doing is well, it's a very, very strange way to say it, but nourishing the body or the mind with the right amount of poison. I mean, the truth is, what is poison, yes, and what is medicine? Because at the end of the day, they go together actually, very much. It's not like the one is evil and the one is good. It has to go in the right balance. The right amount of poison is medicine, yes, and the wrong amount of medicine is poison. So therefore, the practice, what it does is it gives you that. Of course, now practice is not a physical thing. So, of course, although there are physical aspects of it, that we do certain rituals and follow certain things, but nevertheless, it's initially based on concept, of course. Using concept as a way to touch the reality. That's what practice is, I think. And so what it does is it gives the right amount of insanity. Because we think that our society's way of functioning is sane, yes? And this is just, this is correct. And but the thing is, we do realize that it's not right. But we don't talk about it, of course. We cover it up. And because normally where it sort of leaks out, in Tibetan we say dzungkuktu, you know, meaning like if you keep lying, then at some point that there is a sort of a ditch or a hole that sort of reveals that you've been lying. It's like when we smile, like, or when we smirk, when we keep lying, yes, that there is a sort of a smirk, a particular way of smiling, and then there is a sort of like a little sort of dent, you know, like it could be anywhere around the face. So normally we say, as a joke, of course, we say the ah. So
no, I can't stop smiling.
So in the same way, our society, we do know, but of course we cover it up very nicely. But where it gets leaked is, I mean, it should be quite obvious, is that every year, or probably maybe every 6 months or so, or every time actually, the society is trying to sort of update the system, you know. And it sounds very good, yes, updating. It sounds like renewing, and there's a freshness to it. But what it really is trying to say is that I think it realizes that they are false with this set system. That they suddenly just discovered one mistake. And so now they have to sort of patch that up. So they name that updating. And of course, the more you patch it up, the more patching it needs. Yes. But at the end of the day, it's a room full of plasters, you know. It's a wall of plasters. And so what the practice does is that it gives that right amount of insanity, just the right amount, so that then we are not too fixated on thinking that this is me, this is now completely, permanently me. I am fully alive, and that fully alive means I should have a certain beat of rhythm. I mean, certain rhythm of beats, of the heart, a certain height, a certain complexion, and so on and so on. The list just goes on. Yes, and if you have those, then you're alive. If not, then not. So we have that kind of pressure on ourselves. So that the moment we experience a little bit of irregularity, then we are quite shaken by it, quite disturbed by it. So what the practice does is it gives that constant, needful insanity to us, so that we are not surprised at all when something that is beyond the schedule takes place. We are not really bothered that much, unless, of course, now we are at a really critical situation, which, of course, in time, even the practice will even take care of that also. Yes. But to begin with, it helps us to feel all right when we have just, when we feel just from time to time certain ups and downs, we are pretty much undisturbed by it. And often, I don't know, but if you do become a long-term practitioner, then probably you will have that common question is that how well is my practice going? How far am I? Are we there yet? So you'll have those questions. And so therefore, probably one answer sort of to give already ahead is that if you feel kind of content, if you feel not too bothered with ups and of the general ups and downs, that is the sign. Yeah. There is no real sort of suddenly you're able to see night as clear as day, and it's not like that. It's just you'll be less worried in terms of I don't know, physical or mental frustrations, from less worried from those things. But nevertheless, it doesn't mean that the worries will stop, of course. But when they come, you will not be surprised by it. Sometimes we become so shocked, yes, that even though it's not right now at our face, that we feel as if it's more than that.